Hi everybody, welcome back. This is our third video in the modeling series for the Doric Column, and in this video we're going to unwrap our model here and prepare it for texture painting. So I have the model here. I have all of the subdivision removed, so there's no sub D applied right now. And what we want to do is apply some seams to our model, and the seams will tell WRAPR how to unwrap the mesh. So we really want to think about how we want to texture it when we think about where we're going to lay down our seams. Now if we would have a different material, let's say for this base section here, then we may want to remove it by creating a seam, which is a loop here, and cutting that section off from the rest of the model. Anytime that we would, let's say in a model like this, lay down a seam, and let's get inside our group here, and if you use the shift key, that will create a seam or mark a seam over the entire loop. And anytime that we would do a full loop like this, it would actually detach this whole lower section from the rest of the model, not in the physical space, only in the UV space here. So everything stays unaltered. All of this is only information for WRAPR itself. So we really don't need to worry about the material changing from section to section. We really want to just kind of have all of the same material, either concrete or marble or something. And the way we're going to use Substance Painter, and the way Substance Painter works is it's very smart in figuring out where the occluded areas. So it kind of uses, I don't know if it's ambient occlusion techniques, but it can tell where, kind of like V-Ray dirt, where it applies dirt to kind of the edges and the corners and things. And there, in Substance Painter, there are smart masks which are very similar. So in order for that to work properly, we want this to all be kind of one single UV island over in our UV grid in WRAPR. So what that would mean is we would just want to lay down a single seam over the whole model here. And we'll just find a logical place, probably right here in the front, and we can go ahead and cut that. Now we could also split this in half, and that wouldn't be a horrible thing either. We just have two sections to work with. It might be a little more tedious over in WRAPR, and it would give us a seam on both sides, but I don't think it would be all that noticeable. The good thing about that is if we really wanted to save some UV space in our UV grid, we could just overlap them and kind of do them so that they're identical to each other and work on both of them at the same time. Now WRAPR is pretty smart. After I've played with it for a while, it takes and does a lot of automatic process, where something like 3ds Max, you have to do some of those steps manually that WRAPR does automatically. It does a form of pelt mapping. If you're familiar with UV unwrapping and other softwares, it kind of creates a stretcher and some springs is what they call it, and they kind of pull the mesh apart so that it can straighten out things like these hard corners and kind of be able to flatten things out. It needs to stretch out all of the vertices. So it does a good job at that, and then it does a little bit of a relax on its own, all automatically. So this is important, and I'll show you why. Let's get in and just lay down here. Let me tap Shift, and we want to mark a loop here. Come down, hold Shift, mark a loop here, come down, tap Shift, and mark the bottom, and that's it. There, all of our seams are laid in. Now let's go and launch WRAPR. It'll create a group here, open up WRAPR. If it doesn't, then just reselect the group and launch it again. So you can see it processing down here. It takes a little bit of time. We have a pretty heavy mesh. Here's our mesh kind of unfolded. Here's the pelt mapping, and now here is our kind of stretched out pelt mapped mesh or unwrapped mesh. Now I'm going to turn on checker, and let's rotate our model here. And the one thing, turn off the edges. You can see we have these squares here, and that represents our material grid, if you will. Now, you can see what's happening in the column. We have relatively the same size squares at the top and bottom, but look at the squares in here. So if we're applying a material to this and we would just leave this alone, everything in the middle would become horribly distorted and stretched out. So anything that we would put, the texture would become almost like scaled in that direction. So whatever a 1 by 1 here is, this now becomes the 1 by 1 over this section of the model, if that makes sense. So there's a couple different ways we can combat that. Let's go back to our model, say yes, we want to exit. I didn't save any of the UVs there. So the one thing we can do is get in here and actually add some edge loops. And if we went through, and let me actually select the ring first, that would help. And let's say I wanted to add 4 of these. That's going to actually help WRAPR to proportion this a little better, because it's looking at the distance between these 2 edge loops, and then when it got down here, there's such a long distance between those edge loops that when it kind of stretched things apart and then went and relaxed things, that it relaxed and pulled all of these back together. So now, by creating these extra edge loops, it will give WRAPR a little more information, and the checkerboard will be a little more even. Now the problem is we're going to incur a little bit more processing time, and let's try that one more time. The big problem is it's really hard. It becomes harder and harder to work with our UV mesh the more dense it becomes. So you can see processing time takes a lot longer. And there we go. We see that it's a lot better. It's still not perfect. And it really wouldn't be unless we put maybe another set of edge loops in here so that the size of the grid overall that's making up this model was relatively all the same. So we would go and add, and let me actually close this. And grab a loop there and just deselect that and that. Do a ring, and now if we went and added another edge loop, let that go through and process, you can see we have 1200 edges in that selection. So it's taking a little bit of time. There we go. Now things are going to be a little bit better, or a lot better actually, than where we first started with WRAPR. But the processing time is going to go up again. And let's see, it's not actually that bad, but you can see it is taking a significant amount of time longer. But overall, the proportion of our grid will be a little better here. So let that go ahead, process. This is kind of stretching things out, and there we go. Now let's go to checker and take a look. And things are definitely looking a lot better here overall. However, it's not perfect. And if I wanted to get in here and start doing anything, it's going to take a long time to process anything in here. So let me select all of these and let's lock them. And let's say I just wanted to grab those endpoints there, vertices, or whatever you would call them, and I wanted to move this here. You can see it's almost impossible to get in here. I mean, it is. It just takes a while for things to catch up because there's so much going on and so much information. So it's not the most ideal way to go about this with WRAPR. And I'm going to show you a little bit better method. I'm going to close this without saving it again. I'm going to back this up, get rid of some of those edge loops that we laid down, and go all the way back to where we started. There we go. And now we just have, and we could even take out this center one. I have it there to kind of support the sub D, but I don't think it's going to make that big of a difference here. So let's just select that loop and get rid of it. And now let's get in, and it's going to be a lot easier to work with this, and it's going to process a whole lot faster as well. There we go. And you'll see it's going to be really small, this section of the channeling here, but it's going to be a little bit easier to work with. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to select everything first and rotate it so it can kind of mimic our column over here. And okay, we're upside down here, so let me just turn this around. Okay, so we can see overall, if we look at the size of our pillar and look at this, this needs to be in the same proportion as our geometry. So what I want to do is I'm going to grab all of these lower endpoints here and lock them. And now we're going to grab all of the upper ones, and we're going to go ahead and move those up. And let me turn back on the checkerboard here. Let's get rid of the edges, and we can start to see what's happening as we get better proportion here. And we want those to be as close to squares as possible, and that lets us know. As soon as they turn into rectangles, we know the proportion is off. So let me just lift this up a little bit more. And there we go. That was a lot easier. And looks a million times better as far as the unwrapping. You can see a little bit of an issue down here. We can also turn on stretching and see where the real stretching is happening up here in the corners, which isn't too bad on a model like this. But we could get in here and let's turn off our stretching. Actually, let's turn that back on so we can see what's going on. And we could start straightening out some things. And if I would go and do that now, you'll see it will pull the whole model back down to where it was. So I want to lock some things here. And that made it go crazy. So we want to really lock everything except what we're working on when we're doing something like this here. So let me deselect those, lock all of those. You'd really call these pins, I guess, in proper UV terminology. But now we can straighten those out, move those down, and everything else will stay in place. We can scale those up a little bit if we wanted, and you can see that the stretching is going away. And we want to go ahead and lock those. We can use our edge select and double click, and then switch over to our UV select, unlock those, and that was weird. Okay, so I didn't have these locked here, and all of the outer edges aren't locked either, so let me make sure everything's locked here. And that's because when I double clicked here, it actually did the entire outside perimeter of the UV island. So just coming across here, and this is because we have that square that's going into the circle. And let's unlock that, and now we should be able to straighten that out, pull that down. And can grab, make sure we lock that, and I'm just going to straighten this last one out, and then we'll move on, because I think you guys get the point of what we're doing here. Unlock and align there. So I don't know that this is going to help out overall with, let me lock that again. Actually grab this section here and scale it. So it lines up a little better. And let's turn off the stretching, or yeah, the stretching here, and let's just unlock all of these so we can get rid of them. And it's still a little weird down here, but overall it's not too bad. You're not going to really notice that. If we wanted to fix a particular spot, we could get in and just select a certain edge and look down here, and we can see that that section there. Let's lock all of these, look at that edge, and you can select that whole row there, unlock that, and try to straighten that out. And oops, everything is unlocked. And let's grab that row, unlock, oops. I had everything selected. Okay, it's already blue. Now we can select and unlock just those. And you can see just by aligning them that it's straightened out our checkerboard there. I'm not going to do that because it's creating some overlap in there. And we could try with the outside pinned. We could try to get into the middle here and just unlock that, and then do some relaxing in there. But you can see that it's messing up some of the other stuff that we did. So I'm just going to call this good. And let's just take one final look at it here. Not too bad overall. And now we can go ahead and save this. And actually, I want to continue working because I need to shrink this down inside of our box here. So let me grab everything again. And now let's scale this down. And I feel like it's a little weird to me still. I'm just going to stretch this out just a little bit more. Now we can scale that down and move that into place. And tried packing it. It doesn't seem to work for me all that well. And just make sure that we're inside of our grid here everywhere. And it's very time consuming. It's not fun to do UV unwrapping. And anybody who says it is, I think, is a little bit crazy. And WRAPR does make it a little bit easier. I still do like some of the tools that I get out of 3ds Max, and I'll probably use that the majority of the time still. I like the automatic relaxing, but as I'm sure WRAPR evolves, then I will use that just as much. So let's unlock that, and there we go. Looks good. Let's save this. And now we can go back, and I want to right click and reload from WRAPR finally. So I know that was a long-winded explanation, and there was a lot of back and forth, and we could do it a lot quicker the second time around, but overall it was a good exercise to take a look at how WRAPR works. So now what we would do if we were going to take this into Substance Painter, the first thing we want to do is subdivide this. And we don't actually have to subdivide this. We could take this into Substance Painter like it is and just, we do want to get in and soften coplanar. And just want to drag your soften edges. And those smoothing groups get carried over into Substance as well. So we can do our texture painting in Substance and come back and apply it and then put sub D on, and that would still work there. So what we want to do is export this as an FBX, and I'm going to export just the selection of the pillar, and I'll see you guys over in Substance Painter. Okay, so I went ahead and exported this, and I realized that I made a mistake here, and I just wanted to show you guys this. Look at how many textures that were exported, 2,841. Why is that? Well, it has to do with just something with the way that FBX and DAE seem to write out of SketchUp, that for some reason it writes every single face as its own texture if that face isn't triangulated. So we need to go back into our model here, and we're going to triangulate the mesh. And we can do that via this button here. And that's in Quad Face Tools, and that'll go through and triangulate everything for us. And there we go. We can see all of our triangles. Now I'm going to go ahead and export it again, and we should get a much better result. And these are the settings as well, just current selection, texture maps, Y is up, and model units. And let's export that again. And it went a lot quicker, and you can see we have one texture that was written, and that's what we want. So I'm going to jump over into Substance now, and here we are in Substance Painter. And what you want to do is just go to New, and there's an option under New to Browse, and you're going to browse for the FBX file that we saved out of SketchUp, and we'll open that up over here in Substance Painter. So here's our new project screen, and you want to set your template here depending on if you're using Unreal Engine. I'm going to set this to Specular Glossy because this is most of the render engines that you would use. The path tracing render engines would use this here, and your PBR game engines would use more of a metallic roughness. I'm just going to use this for now, and we can set this to 2048. Turn on compute tangent space per fragment, and I need to select the mesh, and we can see right here. So I'm going to say OK. That'll go ahead and pull that in, and there we go. And there we can see the unwrapping that we did with WRAPR. And now the first thing we need to do is bake down our textures. We're going to bake them at 2K. And I'm going to leave everything at default. You can turn off probably world space normal position, things like that. I'm just going to leave them there. I'm just going to create an extra map. It's not really going to do anything. We don't have any high poly mesh that needs to get baked down. If we did something in ZBrush and sculpted some wear and tear and then wanted to bake that onto the low poly SketchUp model, we could do that here. And just be mindful of our naming convention. But for now, we're just going to bake this down, and we'll see that it starts to populate. And after that, we can just go and paint on our model or paint on our UV. I'm not going to get a whole lot into detail with Substance Painter. We'll save that for a different tutorial. But it works a lot like Photoshop. And you can see our maps here. And I can toggle through them. They're not set up yet. But we have layers over here. We can change blending modes, change opacity, and we have a fill layer and just a regular layer here. So I'm going to delete the default layer. I'm going to put in a fill layer, and I'm just going to put a uniform color. I'll just leave it the default gray, and then I'm going to put another fill layer on top. Actually, I might drag that underneath, and let's darken this down. Say OK. And now what we can do is put a mask on here, and we can just put a mask, and you can see that's our black mask. And if we had that, then we would go and paint on our black mask with a white brush, or we can put a white mask and just paint, and the other layer would come through. Now, we don't need to do it that way. Obviously, we can just put a layer on and just go ahead and start painting. And we can set our color. And you can see the UV map there. So you hold Alt, we can rotate around. And it's really nice. We're actually painting over the geometry, which is really, really cool. So you can do some vandalizing here in digital space. Now, what's cool about doing the fill layers with the masking is that we can use some of the smart masks that come with Substance Painter. So if we drag that in, watch what happens. Very cool. Now we have a procedural smart mask, and we can go down, maybe make our fill layer a little more glossy, and let's see how cool that is. Kind of have the glossiness on the layer underneath. And we can control our environment. And that was done that quickly. I just used a smart mask, 2 layers, and we made a really cool looking column. And if we wanted to go in, I could do add a paint layer in here. We could change this and start painting in here. I'm actually going to delete that. We can put a layer on top, get in here with maybe let's see, a diffuse. We could do more of a greenish color, and grab a certain brush and come in here and start painting maybe some moss and adjust the color. And change the opacity. Just have it be really subtle. And we could paint that on. And change our color, paint some more. And I'm going to do a really bright color just so we can see with that brush. And now what's cool is I can take one of those smart masks and even drop it on that layer, and you can see that it masks out everything except for maybe the edges there. We have a lot of control in our masks as well, and I'm going to get rid of this altogether. And I'm going to get rid of that mask and just try maybe a different occlusion. And this is kind of setting up almost as a dirt would. And we can grab this and invert it. And maybe desaturate this a little bit. And that's really cool. So I'm going to go ahead and play with this, pause the video, and create kind of a cool texture, and then we'll go back into SketchUp, apply that to our column over there, and then add some sub D on top of that, and then wrap up the video. Alright, so here's the material that I was playing with, and it's not perfect, but overall I think it's pretty good looking, considering I only spent about 5 minutes just messing with this. So I just added a bunch of fill layers and some masks on top of each other. And this is the result. So we have some wear and tear kind of around the edges. I have a little bit of just a green, maybe algae, moss or something at the bottom, and creeping up as some ground dirt. And I could go through and get a little more detailed, even paint maybe some cracks, something along the lines in there. But I think for now what I'm going to do is just go ahead and save this out, and then I'll see you back over into SketchUp. What we need to do is export our textures, and this will bring up the export dialog, and we could pick kind of a preset for what we're trying to export for, anything from V-Ray to Keyshot to Corona. So I'm just going to leave it as the default, and it'll just kind of give me the document channels, which we're only going to use the diffuse over in SketchUp anyway. So let me go ahead and export these out. And hit export, and that'll go through pretty quickly. And I'm just going to jump back over into SketchUp, and we want to sample our texture here. And all we're going to do is go and grab it on the hard drive. And we can see here that we have a normal map, and then we also have a specular map, and we have our diffuse map. So I'm just going to drop the diffuse map in, and that should sit right where we need it to sit. And you can see that it's lined up all the way around. Green is at the bottom, just like we saw. And now what's really neat is we can go and subdivide this. And WRAPR created those nested groups there, but and we'll watch that when sub D does its job, that all of the materials will stay in place. And I think I just got a crash, and I've been getting a lot of crashes lately, and I just think that due to using some alpha plugins, obviously with WRAPR, even Enscape. I think they're still in their infancy, so they tend to create a little bit more some issues with SketchUp. I've been having a little more crashes lately, but went ahead here and reopen that, and I'm going to get our file back here and get back to where we were. Okay, so here we are again. I exploded down those wrapper groups inside, and hopefully that will fix our issue, and subd can go ahead and subdivide this. And there we go. For whatever reason, it seemed to have lost all of my creases here. So I'm not sure what that issue is about. Let me turn that off. Could just be exploding. Get inside here, and sure enough, don't have any creases marked. Huh. Well, I just want to show you guys that if we did jump back into Substance Painter and went ahead and we're, let's say, painting on this, that we could bring that back right over into SketchUp and easily just reload. And we could also paint right here. And paint a little happy face on there, and we can export that and then open that into SketchUp. So that is pretty cool. Now I don't want that to be on there, so I'm going to come back here and undo that and then just save that out again. And that way I can give you guys the model, and you'll have a nice column to play with. You'll even have the texture map that you could take that into Photoshop and do some extra detail, add some cracks or anything else you would want on that. And there we go. So I'll give you guys the other maps as well if you wanted to play around with this in V-Ray or TheoRender, Corona, even Enscape. You could use this in there, and I can show you guys quickly what that would look like. I'm just going to go ahead and fix these creases and pause the video first. So before we do anything else, I do want to show one more thing that's important to understand with Substance Painter, WRAPR, and these textures that we're creating. So if I wanted to create another texture out of Substance Painter, and I have one here that I exported out, and I wanted to make a copy of this pillar, and I actually created two, so I'm going to make two copies here. Now the one thing we want to do is make sure that they are unique. So I'm going to use the make groups and components unique part of Frito scale, and that'll make sure that both of those are unique. And the next thing we want to do here, is I want to get in, and the UVs are already applied here. Now what should happen but doesn't for some reason, and it could just be that I maybe something that I did, but I can't load, and if somebody knows how to do this, please let me know, but I can't right click on this and go to WRAPR and load in the UVs from WRAPR anymore. It's not an option here. So if I would go ahead and apply this over here, the UVs are going to be all messed up because we don't have currently a tool to apply kind of in the UV space, I guess. So it would be nice if we had something along those lines. But for now, what we need to do is get in and we need to copy the UV coordinates. And we can do that with either UV Toolkit, and there's a copy UV coordinates here, or Sketch UV. And I use the Sketch UV one just because it gives you a dialog. And you click that, you right click, you go to Save UVs. Saved it for all of those faces. And now we're going to apply this new material here. And you'll see how messed up that looks. Because Sketchup doesn't have any rhyme or reason, it just applies it. And everything is all messed up there. So what we're going to do is select everything, go to Sketch UV again, and then just load UVs. And you can see that it went ahead and corrected that. And everything is sitting now as it should. And I have one more material I'm going to load up here. And I have that here, so just make sure this is unique. Get in, let's save the UVs, texture, and actually let's use UV Toolkit and just see that that works too. So we're just going to save them, and we get it down here, which is saying that it remembers. Let's apply our third material here. And then just restore. And there we go. And it's similar, just a little bit different here. This is more of a marble, and this is more of a concrete overall. So there's our three materials, all very different, very unique, adds a lot of detail. Overall, we also have the maps for adding normals to create the bump, and then you can add whatever specularity or glossiness or anything along those lines. So I will include these in the description or on the Facebook page, and I'll save these to Dropbox and give you guys these so you can mess around with them as well. So I hope that was helpful. It's been a long series of long videos, and we covered a lot of information on just technique in general and how to do things cleanly, and that's my big thing, is really want to emphasize to build your geometry the proper way on the front end, and it saves a whole lot of trouble and headache down the pipeline. You won't have to constantly go back and correct mistakes, and you just need to think ahead and understand the logic of how things work and what these other tools are expecting, and you can build things the right way. So, all right, I hope you guys all have a great day, a great evening wherever you are. Happy rendering, happy sketching, and I hope you continue winning with all of your projects. See you in the next video.